know a lot about Montessori or you may know a little. It doesn't matter because today I'm going to give you the pieces of information you're going to need. Maria Montessori was the first woman doctor in Italy in the late 1800s. Now what that's going to tell you is that she didn't start out to be an educator. She started out to be a doctor. And her first tenure out of medical school, now I'm not sure if it was by choice or that's all she could get, was in an institution for mentally disabled children. Now at that day and age, they didn't think those children could learn. They didn't even attempt to teach them anything. They just fed and clothed them. When she took over, she put learning material in the environment and she watched. And if they showed any interest in the learning materials, she left it. If they ignored it, she got rid of it. What happened was that those children rose to normal levels in a very short period of time. The world was shocked, and she began to draw heavy interest from the world. So as time progressed, she traveled from country to country, continent to continent, and she tried her program anywhere she was invited, even in America. What happened from that was she found out how human beings learn. Now they're like a plant seed. A child's brain and psyche is much like a plant seed. If you hold a plant seed in your hand, you know that it has all that potential for whatever plant seed it's going to become, whatever plant it's going to become, but it can't unless you plant it, right? However, you can't take it to the top of a mountain in the winter, drill 20 feet down, huck it in, and expect anything to happen. No, you have to give it the right conditions. You have to make sure it's getting the right amount of sunshine, and make sure it's getting the right amount of moisture, plant it just the right depth, give it a little bit of care so that the weeds don't strangle it, goats don't eat it, cars don't drive over it, and it will do its magic. We don't march out into the garden, open our book up, and teach a plant seed how to grow. Nope, we plant it and we wait. And with the right conditions, it will bring forth every bit of its potential. Humans are the same. And what she discovered was how the brain and the soul of a child evolves and grows. It's not the same as adults. Once our brain shifts gears at some point in our teens or early 20s, we don't learn the same. As a matter of fact, the brain takes a shift at 3, again at 6, again at 12, again at 16, and I believe it probably shifts throughout our whole life. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today so you'll understand where your child is in the scheme of things. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to tell you that Maria Montessori and I have some things in common. First of all, I only speak the language that you're hearing. And I don't know if you speak another language. I don't. She only spoke Italian. Well, I'm not positive if she spoke maybe another language, but I know for a fact she did not speak English. And I'm going to tell you what an impact that had when she traveled to America and taught the people at that time in the early 1900s. Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell invited her over and said, "Show us what you're doing." She came over, set up programs, and left. And lo and behold, she did not know about English because she said, just teach them how to read phonetically. Now there's a problem with that because a phonetical language, all languages are not phonetical. And what makes a language phonetical is each language is comprised of sounds. The average language will have between 25 and 50 base sounds and that many symbols. Do you know how many English has? Probably not. So let me tell you, it has 250 plus. You know how many symbols, right? Yes, 26. 26 symbols, 250 sounds. Do you see a problem yet? Well, it is a problem. You see, English is a conglomerate of many languages. If you look in the dictionary at the etymology of words, you can often see 3 different origins. It'll say Old Scandinavian, Middle French, Early Italian. So it's basically telling you that they took a little bit from this language, a little bit from this language, and a little bit from this one, and squished it together for this one word. So, English is the most non-phonetical language on the planet. 26 sounds, 26 symbols, 250 sounds. It's not easy language to learn to read. Now, we come hardwired as children to learn how to speak. We will speak whatever language we hear. Reading, however, is not hardwired. It is a learned skill. Well, now I'm going to fast forward to the next part. At one point in our history in America, we were a nation that could read. Do you know why I say that? Because I have proof that we can today. Authors who are writing our books to sell to adults want to sell them. But in order to make sales, they have to write a book that someone could read. So they poll to see what the average reading level is of adults in America. Do you know what it is? Well, it's 5th grade. 5th grade. Pretty sad. Now, you did hear me say we were a language, we were a nation that could read. Why do I say could? Because I have proof that we could. In the 1700s, in 1776, in America, everybody knows what happened. We won our independence from Britain. We became a sovereign nation, and we were independent. However, 10 years later, the powers that were in force went, oh boy, we're going to have problems if we don't do something and do it quickly. We were going to be overtaken by other countries that saw us as a prospering nation that would be advantageous to possess. So they knew that we needed to get a stronger centralized government in force. So 2 factions arose. One called themselves Federalist, and they were saying, oh, it should be like this. Another group arose and said, no, it should be more like this. They didn't know what to call themselves, so they said, well, we're not them. So they called themselves anti-federalists. Now, do you know how they got people in America to vote this way or this way back in the 1700s? Well, no smartphones, no satellite TVs, no internet, no media. None. It was the New York Daily Herald. Now, another question I'm going to propose to you is, do you know how old we were educated to at that time? Most people learned it in history, and this could ruffle up some memories and make you go, oh yes, I remember that. Well, at that day and age, we were only educated to 12, because most of us did not go on to secondary education. We needed workers. We needed farmers and carpenters and blacksmiths. We didn't need a lot of thinkers. We were not industrialized yet. So the vast majority of people in America were only educated to 12. So those are the ones that the 2 groups were fashioning their vote this way and this is why in the New York Daily Herald. The farmers and their wives could sit down and over tea go, what do you think, Martha? I don't agree. Now later those 2 groups and those papers that they wrote and published in the New York Daily Herald were published into books. One was called the Federalist Papers and one was called the Anti-Federalist Papers. And if you have not read any portion of that, just for curiosity's sake, you need to Google it and read a little bit, because it is extremely difficult. Even attorneys today, which I think are probably among the most highly educated in this kind of language, which is legal, even though the legality of these texts that were written weren't that legal, they were just complicated. But I think attorneys probably are the ones that should come the closest to being able to read it. And they can't, not with ease. It takes patience and figuring to read that. And yet, at that day and age, the average layman could read that. So, could read, can't read. Why? What happened? Well, I'm going to tell you. In America, 1920s, education underwent a huge revolution and they changed everything to the present day program of education in America, to what we are still using today that has proven that it's turning us into a nation that cannot read. In 1980, Congress did a 3-year study on education in America, and at the end of the 3 years entitled the report, A Nation at Risk, mandated a return to phonics. 1994, they did a follow-up study. It was shorter. Nothing had changed, and the statistics had gotten worse. I don't know of any other studies since then. So it's only gotten worse. What are we using today? Whole language, memorize the words. So we're using in our educational government-based schools a system that doesn't work, and we continue to use it. And by the way, they changed not only the reading, but the math and everything else. Now, let me take the next step. In the 1930s in America, there was a brain surgeon named Samuel Orton, and he had a problem. He had some brain damage war veterans that he wanted to re-educate to read. Now, he understood how the brain works. The brain works like this, basically. It has 4 major learning modalities: verbal, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic body. And he knew that if you use them simultaneously, long-term memory tracks and synapses would wire up and hook up for long-term retention. He coupled up with some educators who knew the classroom, and together they put the program in place that we use here at the Montessori Learning Center in Linden, Utah, with our students with great success after I found it about 12 years ago. And today it's 2013. So 2013, 12 years ago, we found this wonderful method, and that's what your child is going to get to use in the classes to learn to read. So let me explain that method to you. Understanding that it needs to happen, those 4 learning modalities need to take place at the same time, they put this program into effect. First, they boiled down the English language to about 42 sounds that they thought would be a good working set. And it was represented by 71 phonograms. Phono means sound, gram means written, written sounds. The 26 of those 71 are the alphabet that everybody knows. However, in English, the vowels are tricky. Most languages, the vowels have 1 sound, but in English, A has 4, O has 4, U has 4, I has 3, E has 2, and sometimes we use Y. What are the other sounds? Well, they're pure units of sound. They are not blends. This is a pure unit of sound. This is a pure unit of sound. So every day the children see, say, hear, and write their phonograms. And we have a systematic method of teaching them this that we teach you as we teach them, because we work together hand in hand with our parents. It's not just we'll do it for you, it's we'll do it together. So you will be in the loop, you will be learning and being taught with her by your child's teacher as you drop her off every morning how we do this, so that you will have no mystery and you'll be able to help her at home, because there's minimal homework that you're going to do with her. So every day they see, say, hear, and write the 71 phonograms. Now they won't know all of them to start with, but we have a way of building it into them so that they get 2 to 4 new phonograms to write on a daily basis at home each night. So we send these home stapled to the top of a tracking sheet that you will find in your child's zipper binder, like you probably already have. And at the top of that tracking sheet, you're going to notice that there are some little staple marks on this one. And you will see that this child got these phonograms to write at home that night. They were stapled here, and they returned to us the next morning with you having helped them fill it out, so that each night they would get to review what it was that they are learning that day. phonograms. And if they know those phonograms, then the next day they get new ones to learn. That's one facet of it. The other facet is that I want to say we because I feel like I was a part of it, even though the brain surgeon was actually doing this before I was born. I still feel like, I was right there. They took the basal reader words. Now, we all had basal readers that were educated in this country. A basal reader are those little beginning readers that children get and still do as they begin to read, that have 10 or 15 words at the beginning of the little story that they're going to learn to read that in that story. So a basal reader is not chapter book, but it's different little stories contained in one book with words that you're going to memorize in that story. Now, if you type or keyboard like this, you will. If you keyboard like this, you won't. I don't know how you learned to keyboard, but I know how I did. And you did not learn to keyboard or type cat, hat, elephant, giraffe, dog, pup, and map. And then when you could type those number of words, you learned 10 more. No, you did drills. MOPV, 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 SLDK, SLDK, until your fingers knew where to go. And then you moved to others until you slowly started typing words. And then you practiced until one day you could do it automatically like this. No, you can't have that. Oh, put that away. No. Oh, yeah, that'll be good. Your brain is thinking what you're doing and going, and you don't have to think where your fingers are going because it became hardwired. So with this method, we hardwire the rules of the English language. So the basal readers that were created for the masses to learn 2,000 words, memorize 2,000 English words, and you would magically be able to read. First of all, you probably aren't aware of how many words in the English language. Neither was I until I used the wonderful internet and Googled it and went, how many do we have? Well, there are 3,000 words, 300,000 words, in the English language. Unless you count in medical and legal, and there could be 500,000 words. But let's just boil it down to 300,000 words. Now, how close to being able to read do you think you would get only memorizing 2,000 of those 300,000 words? That's what they're attempting to do. It's in the Ayers list, the AYERS, that you could look up on the internet, that was comprised by those educators in that day and age when they made this great change. Now, let me just say here, I don't think that they were intending to have a disaster and a failure. I think that people were, at that time, change was about. We were becoming an industrialized nation, and they thought, let's change this too. So it wasn't an intentional thing to make us be less than we want to be, but it happened. So, Samuel Lorton and the educators, Romalda Spalding, Anna Gillingham, Nina True, to speak of some of the educators, there were 3 major ones, put together this program. So they took those 2,000 words, made up the 71 sounds associated with the phonograms, and with those 2,000 words, they began with the easiest and worked through those 2,000 words, teaching the rules of English. I before E, except after C, and if we say A, those rules are actually patterns, and the brain begins to see those patterns and be able to read any word. Just like you learn to type any word, not just a select few. These children will be able to decipher and discover how the magic of unlocking every word. Because words just have patterns, repeatable, recognizable patterns, that once they get those patterns down, they're able to read. So with this, we begin with the rules, and they start on the level that they are at. If it's a beginning student, they will start with easy words. If they're a student that can spell a little, that's okay. We'll start them a little bit higher than 3-letter phonetical words like hop and pop and mat and sat and rat and hat. We'll start them on a little harder words, but remember, it's not about spelling. It's about learning the rules of the English language.